Honourable members, please be seated. Secretary General.
Motion in the name of the Honourable Professor Biman Prasad.
I now call upon the Honourable Professor Biman Prasad to move his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Parliament authorises the Standing Committee on Economic Affairs to assess the impact of direct initiative to farmers in the agriculture sector, in particular the distribution of seeds and seedlings for cash crop, help in the form of materials provided to dairy farmers, provision of irrigation pumps, piping, rice planting, ploughing and harrowing of land by the Ministry of Agriculture, handling of breeder, goat, sheep, and report back at the next sitting of Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a seconder?
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
I now invite the Honourable Biman Prasad to speak on his motion. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the importance of agriculture in Fiji is well known to all of us. For at least a century, agriculture was synonymous with the sugar industry, rightly regarded as the backbone of Fiji's economy for almost 30 years of our independent history. However, while the focus was on sugar, the other sectors were also being boosted. We had the Lakena and Riketi rice schemes. Every cane belt town had a rice mill, including the driest of districts like Tavua and Ba. There was diversification and self-sufficiency for most rural households in terms of both cash crops for sale and self-consumption, as well as rotating crops, intercropping to maintain nutrient balance in the soil. But, Mr. Speaker, like the time, farming practices have also dramatically changed. Unfortunately, the advisory and expertise from the Agriculture Ministry also whittled to an alarmingly low levels, and here I mean for both sugar and non-sugar sectors. New approaches under the pretext of innovation, mechanization, and you name it, were rolled out. At least 3 decades ago, farmers only required guidance and advice on new ways of doing things. Now, obviously, they need help in the form of mechanization, seeds, and seedlings, and breeder animals. More than 3 decades ago, we had veterinaries posted in every district who could be called at odd hours to visit farms and tend to animals in distress. This has now become a thing of the past. Mr. Speaker, one changes for the better with time, but it seems our agriculture sector has changed for the worse because there are no visible signs of it becoming an important factor in Fiji's economic growth, move towards some degree of self-sufficiency, and a major contributor to GDP. Mr. Speaker, this brings me to the various initiatives of the Agriculture Ministry aimed at helping the farmers. And Mr. Speaker, I acknowledge, as I did in this Parliament before, that during COVID, the Ministry of Agriculture's assistance, especially distribution of seeds, helped a lot of farmers raise production and make their ends meet. At least, Mr. Speaker, if we do a close scrutiny of the Ministry's own survey report of 2020, which reveals that Fiji is lagging far behind in terms of acquiring some semblance of self-sufficiency. One need not look further than the dairy industry. In the absence of parliamentary democracy, it was basically privatized with a 10-year exclusive license given to major business to import powdered milk and bulk butter at zero duty and reconstitute it into dairy products. This is apart from processing fresh milk from our dairy farmers. Mr. Speaker, one only has to look at the 2020 Agriculture Survey summary to note the decline of the industry despite the exclusivity. Milk chilling plants have been constructed in the Western Division, but milk production hasn't increased. Even today, almost 88% of milk is imported and reconstituted. We believe the famous Reva butter is 100% imported, only to be made salty and packaged. The number of dairy farmers has dwindled, and government blames tuberculosis and brucellosis for the decline. There may be a factor, but nothing about how its programs to incentivize farmers and how it is not working. All of us, Mr. Speaker, in this Parliament heard about the young cow grass being hailed as a perfect catalyst to boost milk output in cows. Farmers were told if they didn't plant the grass, they wouldn't qualify for any assistance. Naturally, the question comes to mind, Mr. Speaker, is what has happened to the so-called assistance to revive the dairy industry? Why the policy of providing replacement calves at a subsidized price to dairy farmers has not resulted in increased milk production? The answer is that calves will be ready as cows in 3 years, not immediately. What about the interim? Why then say that it will instantly produce the desired results? Is this due to lack of planning or poor knowledge of the industry? And the list, Mr. Speaker, goes on. Fencing material has been provided to certain farmers. In many cases, we've told that the farmers don't need them, but other forms of assistance. Recently, a well-known dairy farmer in Tailevu was given fencing material for goats, and he showed us those materials, and it is rusting in his yard because he doesn't need it. And he's a dairy farmer, not a goat or sheep farmer. This only serves the purpose of a painful example of wastage of taxpayer funds. Mr. Speaker, there are also issues with plowing and harrowing of farms by the ministry. Last weekend we were in Nabua and we provided examples of how this scheme isn't working there. There are claims that this matter has been raised with the ministry but is being swept under the carpet. Mr. Speaker, we were shown farm access roads as well. These have not been maintained for many years. They are overgrown with grass and weeds. The question is why, whether there is no budget or any other reason. We are also told of lack of subsidies for weedicides and fertilizers for cash crop farmers. We know cane growers have also lost subsidies on weedicides despite needing them the most. Cash crop farmers tell us, Mr. Speaker, that previously the price of a litre of glyphosate was $9.50, but this has risen by $10 to $19.50, an increase of over 100%. Ginger farmers have told us that more than a decade the price of kilogram of baby ginger was $1, and just this year it was increased to $1.60 per kg. It would be interesting to hear what the Honourable Minister says. There are many other examples, Mr. Speaker. However, the point is, in the last 2 decades, agricultural practices around the world has gone through huge changes. Influenced by large corporations, agriculture has become an applied science business. The most successful agriculture economies, including those close to Fiji, such as Australia and New Zealand, have applied scientific research and data-driven methods to increase yields, but they are able to cut their cost and improve their competitiveness, which we have not been able to do. And Fiji, Mr. Speaker, seems to have missed the boat. Simultaneously, the Agriculture Ministry has been in decline. In my view, it has lost direction and expertise. The service it provides to farmers have fallen in both quality and quantity. And like everything under this government, it seems now to be focused on photo opportunities for the Honourable Minister and others. The Minister is constantly pictured as some so-called new initiative, making some grandiose announcements about new developments, new directions, just like he did in Parliament yesterday. That's fine, Mr. Speaker, but what are the results? But on the ground, Mr. Speaker, there is very little to show. And that is why we are asking for this inquiry, Mr. Speaker. The people of Fiji need to understand the truth versus talk. Unless we know what kind of impact is coming from these initiatives, we can't do anything to improve it or change it. There is no use, Mr. Speaker, jumping from a digger or getting behind the wheels of a tractor for a photo opportunity. The cold hard reality is that government has been unable to bring new practices and technology to our agriculture to make Fiji more competitive. And I read a report yesterday which exactly talks about that. So it's not desperation, it's hard fact. This has had a twofold impact, Mr. Speaker. First, our local farmers cannot earn a decent living from supplying food locally because they cannot produce enough to cover the cost of getting the crops to the market. In many cases, it is cheaper for supermarkets to import food than to buy it locally. Mr. Speaker, you can walk into a supermarket in Fiji and find some truly odd products on sale. For example, coconut water imported from Sri Lanka. A single cob of corn wrapped in plastic imported from New Zealand being sold for $6. These are products that are grown right here in Fiji. Clearly, if a supermarket is supplying them, there must be demand. And yet we cannot get our own farmers' products reliably to the consumer market. Mr. Speaker, why? And as I said yesterday, a cassava farmer with 6 tons of cassava being told in Vanua Levu that there are no storage places by AME. This was announced as something to be, Mr. Speaker, apart from the distraction, we are struggling to create a robust, sustained agriculture exporting industry. I recall that it was recently announced that Fiji had for the first time exported more than $100 million worth of non-sugar agricultural products. That's correct. But Mr. Speaker, we also know that we are spending the same amount of money, about $100 million, on importing beef and sheep meat every year. Why is it that in a country that can easily host and farm cattle and sheep, we are importing so much? When looked at in this light, Mr. Speaker, our non-sugar agriculture, like sugar in the... You will have your opportunity, man. You will have your opportunity, my friend.
Order.
You will have your opportunity. Just like sugar in the last 15 years can only be seen as a colossal failure. We need to understand what is going and why. Mr. Speaker, the tragedy of our agriculture industry is that nothing seems to happen unless the minister turns up himself. He distributes some seeds, addresses a meeting here and there, he supplies tractor to some farmers here or new fencing material to farmers there. And of course, the army of government photographers and camera crew that go with him.
Order.
And who can forget, Mr. Speaker, the stray horse that the ministry captured and handed to the people of Nonroga to pull a plow? I would certainly like to know what has happened to that horse. I assume it has run away by now or being used as a right to tame the others. But this is not agriculture, Mr. Speaker. That's not agriculture. This is just politics with a bit of mud attached to it. What we do not see, Mr. Speaker, is emerging farmers who are able to earn a living from the business of farming. We do not see major commercial investment, we've heard about it here, in agriculture which would create agriculture clusters and allow our smaller farmers to grow with them. And Mr. Speaker, we should not forget that our most successful agriculture industry over generations, sugar, was developed like this. First came the large agriculture investor, the CSR company, which became South Pacific Sugar Mills and then Fiji Sugar Corporation. And in the heyday of the industry after independence, at least for 30 more years, farmers were successful and earned good incomes because they worked with and around FSC. Mr. Speaker, we have 1 or 2 large private sector investors in the tobacco and poultry industries. Their success has been to create a group of tobacco farmers and chicken farmers who do not need government support. Mr. Speaker, another global development has been demand for organic foods. This is now worth about $100 billion in the global market, with huge opportunities, Mr. Speaker, for value-added product development. If Fiji could just supply 1% of that market, our economy would be transformed. There are now a few enterprising exporters, no doubt, who are able to export products such as raw kava and turmeric to meet demand in these markets. But these are not just a drop in the bucket compared to what we should be doing. And those exporters will tell you that it is easier to work without the Agriculture Ministry. So, Mr. Speaker, these are just a few of the directions in which our non-agriculture sector needs to go. We need to import substitute in areas like cattle and sheep, meat and vegetables. We need to attract large commercial investors to agriculture to create viable livelihood for small farmers. We have to look at the organic food market. That is a big picture that they need to consider. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we need to understand whether the Agriculture Ministry's initiatives are succeeding or not. Mr. Speaker, millions of dollars of taxpayers' money are being thrown into government initiatives on seeds and seedlings, farming and fencing materials, pumps, tractors, plowing of land, and so on. But what is the effectiveness of this help? That's what we are asking through this motion. Nobody knows. I don't think even the Agriculture Ministry knows. Nobody is able to tell us. Nobody has heard from the farmers who have received this help about how it has helped them in the long run. Because the problem, Mr. Speaker, we have under this government is that it never wants to hear bad news. That's why they oppose all independent inquiries and motions that we bring. It only wants to tell everyone how much money is spending. I mean, we hear over and over again how much is spent here, how much is spent there. But whether that spending is effective or not, that's a big question. It is clear this government, Mr. Speaker, is actually fearful of finding out whether it is doing anything that is producing results. This is because we suspect in the opposition and this side of the House, it is not producing any results. So, Mr. Speaker, let there be an inquiry through the people's representatives, chaired by government members. Majority of them would be government members in this House. Let the people speak and let the people hear how effective the government's policy in this critical area has been, Mr. Speaker. And I ask the government, before they vote down this motion, which they are likely to with the kind of noise that is coming from the minister himself, as they always do, I want to tell them, don't be afraid of the truth. This is part of the process of government reviewing its own policies. Evaluation, I mean, he should understand, what evaluation means. So don't be afraid about the truth. Don't be afraid of hearing that maybe things are not as good as you saying they are. I mean, isn't what you always brag about and say, government is about the truth, government is telling the truth, government is doing this. But let's, Mr. Speaker, use this motion, which has majority of government members in the standing committee, to have an inquiry, to talk to the people and evaluate based on some of the statistics and bring that report to Parliament. And it may well point out where the gaps are, where the government needs to shape, which way it needs to put emphasis, and where, so that we can grow the agriculture sector as a whole. So, Mr. Speaker, I commend the motion to the House, and I hope that the government will support this and have the standing committee inquire into the initiatives and the effectiveness of those initiatives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Biman Prasad for his motion. I now call on the Prime Minister. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to contribute to this motion for debate. As usual, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member opposite comes up with baseless motions for money-wasting ideas so that he can shilly-shally and idle away the nation's time. why should we task the standing committee with doing what any Fijian already can, which is to read the extreme facts and data that the government publishes regularly? If Honorable Prasad wants to assess the impacts of the initiatives and the current overall performance of the sector, he can read that data. Throughout the pandemic, Honorable Speaker, agriculture was a reliable and resilient sector that rose to record strength, supporting livelihoods and enhancing Fiji's nutrition security. We crossed the $100 million mark in agricultural exports for the first time in 2020. Yesterday, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture in his ministerial statement provided an update on how government initiatives have impacted the performance of the agriculture sector over the years. Yet, Honorable Prasad had the gall to call that support a juvenile attempt by the Honorable Minister. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Biman's motion is worse than juvenile. He is arguing with facts and figures and numbers even a child would know better. Here are the facts, Honorable Speaker. After breaking records in 2020, agriculture exports rose to a further $123 million in 2021. Fiji had also witnessed significant growth in export of kava, ginger, and turmeric, among other spices, in the past 2 years, exported mostly to the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, the top 7 agriculture export categories in 2021 were ginger, assorted vegetables, cassava, and chicken meat and eggs. These are all positive results of what this side of the House has shown to the agriculture sector. Unlike members of the other side, we are all about results, not just rhetoric. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Honorable Kurundrani made a statement saying that the contribution of agriculture to GDP has declined since 2013. What he didn't tell you is that the volume of agriculture is at record high, which means production is increasing. Mr. Speaker, I think that the Honourable Member fails to understand the basics of the developmental pathway of any economy. Mr. Speaker, the economic transformation and progress of most countries starts with traditional primary sectors. The major contributors to most economy nowadays are fueled by either industry or service sectors. Honorable Kurundrani is right that this is not the Fijian economy of the 70s, 80s, and the 90s. We are a more diverse economy. Sectors like tourism, manufacturing, and financial services are growing. Mr. Speaker, this shows that our economy is progressing and expanding. We will continue to fulfill our vision of a diversified economy, an economy that doesn't rely heavily on any one sector. Therefore, we remain strong in our support to the agriculture sector, and we will continue to provide the necessary support needed to progress it further. I'd just like to, before I end, Mr. Speaker, go back to the comment that Honorable Tikondondo had talked about, that we are boring. That's the term that they get from their supporters in the social pages, boring. Just because they are now married to Pepe doesn't mean that we should know about the excitement that they receive from that end. But Mr. Speaker, they talked about boring. There's only 3 of them, and there's 27 of us here. We've won two elections. So, Mr. Speaker, we're not really boring. Based on these remarks, sir, I do not support the motion. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Prime Minister for his contribution to the debate. I now give the floor to the Honourable William Ngavoka. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise to speak in support of the motion. Honourable Speaker, as we really need to get to understand the full potential of agriculture, Honorable Speaker. We all know that it is a segment of our economy that can do better and should be doing better, but for some reason it continues to underperform. I know that the Honorable Minister and the government is hyping the fact that in quantum, in dollar terms, it is increasing, but relative to the GDP, it isn't. Honorable Speaker, what we see from this side of the House, Honorable Speaker, is that we need to develop models to help grow agriculture. I must say I was quite impressed with the very comprehensive presentation and his ministerial statement yesterday from the Minister of Agriculture, covering the whole range of products that are being produced in Fiji. I was sitting here with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, and we were asking the question, why can't they really perform to their potential, to their maximum? And he highlighted something that is really illuminating, Honorable Speaker, in that the model that we use, Honorable Speaker, we should follow the FSC model, Honorable Speaker, the support system for every crop. Whether it's coconuts, whether it's ginger, whether it's turmeric, whether it's ndalo, whatever produce we have, we need that kind of model, that kind of support system. In sugar, Honorable Speaker, the support system is such that for every 600 farmers, there's one overseer. That used to be, I don't know what it is like today, but that used to be the case years back when I was a cane farmer. Honorable Andy Salameton can testify to this, I believe. But this is what we need. If you really want to grow agriculture, Honorable Speaker, we need to set up this kind of structure. There must be a support system on the ground in every district to help support the farmers, as they do in FSC. As you know, Honorable Speaker, as a cane farmer, the hand-holding by the overseer from your seedlings, from the harrowing, from the plowing and all that, from the manure, from the fertilizer, is all parts of the relationship with the FSC and to the harvesting and transportation to the mill. That is the kind of model that we need to develop, Honorable Speaker, if you really want agriculture to flourish. If I can digress a bit, I know the Honorable Prime Minister has got a lot of initiatives to help with the cane farm, with the cane crop. But let me just take us back, Honorable Speaker, to the beginning of sugar. When you look at the infrastructure they created, you know, the railway system from Kabanangasau in Nandronga all the way to Raki, and the main routes, and then the trunks to the valleys where they lay the rail network. Yes, it has changed, Honorable Member, but the philosophy then was for the company to pick up your cane from your doorstep. That was it. And the extent of the investments at the time for CSR to do that. I mean, you know, in my district in Dumu, there's one that goes through Nabobo, there's one goes through Yandua, one goes through El Lahuna. I mean, so really, that was the undertaking by the company to pick up your cane from your doorstep. And Honorable Prime Minister, if I can just suggest that we change, we put that in place for our farmers to help them create, to create further, new interest in cane farming. I was a cane farmer, Honorable Speaker. I could have harvested 1,000 tons. But my problem was that at the end of the season, there was 10 over cane, my cane. I could not harvest them all. And it cost me a lot of money. I bought a truck. I was committed to cane farming, but that element, that part of the cane equation had kind of failed. And I believe with us, Mr. Delpa, this is what we're going to do with the farmers. We will work with them to pick up their cane from their doorstep. That will generate more interest in Nandronga, in Navosa, and as far as Raki, Honorable Speaker. But going back to agriculture, Honorable Speaker, that is also what we need to do. The provision of equipment. There was a headline of the last couple of days. One of the political leaders was saying that, the days of knives and forks are gone. So equipment is very important. It's key to all this. I get comments from Nandronga. They take some 3 months after paying for a tractor from government, paying for a digger. It takes them 3 months for the equipment, machinery to arrive at the farm. So these are all that needs to be done to fully support agriculture, Honorable Speaker. Yesterday, I asked the Honorable Minister about turmeric in Kayasi, in Navosa. It grows in abundance there, Honorable Speaker. Kayasi can develop to be a township, and it can be a center for the processing of turmeric. The Nandronga Corporation has a collection center there, already built. And I was suggesting to the minister to turn that into a processing center for turmeric up in the highlands of Navosa, create employment, and bring the buyer, the processor closer to the farmers. He said, Honorable Speaker, that it's commercially driven, but commerce, Honorable Minister, you can give them incentives to motivate these companies to come and set up in Kayasi and process turmeric from there. It's in plentiful supply, as we all know, and it's one of the best. But those are the types of steps we need to take, Honorable Speaker, to grow agriculture. I asked one. I was in a meeting with some villagers in Tailevu, and they said, can you help with the fruits in season or foods in season? Because mangoes and mandarin and duruka, they only come once or twice a year. And when they bring them into town, they normally set up in the verandas of some supermarkets, and they get chased away. And they said, look, can you do something? Come and do something to give us an outlet for the food in season to be sold to the consumers. I mean, this is one area where they could look into, Honorable Speaker, because there's a lot of food in season, a lot of fruits that only come once or twice a year. We'll certainly look into that. When he set up agriculture on the basis of supporting those types of producers. And Honorable Speaker, also in Tailevu, there was the comment made that they would harvest their ginger, but they would carry them from the farm to the picker point, which could be quite a distance. So I said, look, okay, have you spoken with the ministry? Yes, they have. So help with some sort of transportation system to help them from the farm into the collection point for the producers, Mr. Minister.
You don't want a horse?
Actually, they were asking for a horse.
No, you're laughing about the horse.
Actually, they're actually asking, but where is it?
Order.
Honorable Speaker, where they are being supplied is a question over here, Honorable Speaker. Any way to carry the producers from the farms to the collection point, whether it's a tractor or by animal power, horsepower, I suggest that you go for it, Honorable Speaker. But make it happen, Honorable Speaker. Let's not sit here and say everything is hunky-dory, that everything is okay. There are people out there who are asking for assistance. And that is why, Honorable Speaker, we believe with this motion that much more can be done. It is underperforming, and that is why I'm all for this committee to help determine how we can go forward with agriculture. I'll leave it there, Honorable Speaker, and I hope that we are not set in our ways, that we know it all, and that we would not accept something this meaningful and important to help our agriculture industry. Honorable Speaker, thank you.
I thank the honourable member for his contribution to the debate. I now give the floor to the Honourable Minister Plowing. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to address this august House in response to the call by the Honourable Leader of the National Federation Party on an update on farming and agriculture initiatives. Mr. Speaker, sir, at the outset, I'm at a loss to understand why the Honourable Member has asked for such an update. Mr. Speaker, sir, the initiatives in these areas have been well documented and well presented by the Honourable Minister for Agriculture, Dr. Reddy, in this august House time and again, as well as through media coverage and the release. Mr. Speaker, it looks like that Honourable Prasad cannot digest the success that the Ministry for Agriculture has done to the farmers of this country. Mr. Speaker, the motive of the Honourable Leader of the National Federation Party is simply political concerns, selfish political concerns. And I must urge, rather than out of any concern for the welfare or well-being of those in the farming and agriculture sector. It is just another desperate and pathetic attempt to appear relevant and concerned about the farmers, farming and agriculture, with elections around the corner. Maybe, Mr. Speaker, he is just following the Labour Party leader, who went on in doubt about what to do next, tends to beating the drum on behalf of farmers. Empty votes and empty drums in a desperate election gimmick. Mr. Speaker, why, this is my time now, Honourable Prasad. Mr. Speaker, Honourable Gavoka spoke about sugar industry. The cane farmers saw no hope for their families in the sugar industry till 2006. Hear me out, Honourable Gavoka. I'm talking about year 2006, till 2006, because of the non-renewal of land leases. And this is what Honourable Prasad has not mentioned during his speech. Mr. Speaker, it was our Prime Minister who gave hope to our farmers by providing the assistance, and the farmers of this country are very well aware of it. They know it, that it was this man who gave life to the farmers of this country. Because I go to the farmers, I know. I'm telling from my experience. And we are on ground. We are on ground. We know what farmers want. We know what their needs are. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy, on the other hand, to use this opportunity provided by Honourable Prasad to highlight one of the many success stories to come out under this government. Mr. Speaker, in highlighting this youth farm success story, let us all acknowledge and recognize the government, this Fiji-first government, in recognizing the potential in our youths and providing the much-needed resources for their development. Mr. Speaker, as I have reaffirmed, in each of the handover ceremonies, the Fiji-first government stands firmly behind for the youth of the Fiji. Mr. Speaker, the opposition members might talk big here and on social media on their plans and wish list for our youth, but we deliver. Mr. Speaker, and we continue to deliver for the youth of this country. In real terms, in real time and to continue to make real difference in the life of our youth. And we will continue, Mr. Speaker, to grow the Fiji youth brand and always be at their back as we move on into the new normal of the current pandemic. We gave hope, Mr. Speaker, to our youths in these uncertain times. Mr. Speaker, let me also say that Fiji First members are on ground more compared to any other government that we had. Mr. Speaker, as part of our all government response to economic effects of COVID-19 pandemic, the Ministry of Youth and Sports in August 2020 launched a new initiative called the Youth Farm Initiative. The initiative supports improvement of the food security and livelihood. Through this new initiative, Mr. Speaker, youths are encouraged to utilize vacant land within their communities for farming. This initiative, Mr. Speaker, has a strong community foundation and focus on local level capacity building, using local resources, capital, labor, and the land, Mr. Speaker. It utilizes the strength of existing local land-owning group-based networks and builds on it through providing farm implements and other materials such as seeds, fertilizers, water pumps, water tanks, and etc., Mr. Speaker, to kickstart this initiative. Mr. Speaker, it has proven to be a winning formula with growing growth in the number of projects under this program, Mr. Speaker, in a very short period of time. Since August 2020 to date, the ministry has assisted 202 youth clubs with around 6,000 youths to benefit who are members of these youth clubs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, huge response has been received from these interested youths, supported with formal land consent from the landowners for youths to utilize land farming purposes. Mr. Speaker, the total land mass consented for farming by the landowning units to be utilized by the 202 youth clubs is around 1,250 acres, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Youth and Sports Divisional Office works in close collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture to obtain soil samples for testing and advise the youth clubs on land suitable crops, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry provides training on agriculture practices in partnership with Ministry of Agriculture, OISCA, and the Ministry of Youth and Sports trainers from its youth training centers, Mr. Speaker. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry provides direct funding assistance in the form of equipment hire for land preparation, farming tools, and equipment such as spades, forks, knives, materials for greenhouse, along with vegetable seedlings and fertilizers, Mr. Speaker. With the primary purpose of strengthening food security, Mr. Speaker, and providing employment opportunities, the program has enabled these youth clubs to share their harvest within their communities during the COVID-19 pandemic, lockdown period, and generate income with the surplus produce on a regular basis, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we support government's goal of development through integrated approach, the Ministry of Youth and Sports wishes to acknowledge partners and stakeholders who have made it possible to empower and reach the untapped capabilities of these mainly rural youths of Fiji. I acknowledge the Ministry of Agriculture for their technical assistance and support that they have continued to provide for our youths through this program, Mr. Speaker. I also at this juncture, Mr. Speaker, acknowledge the Chinese, Japanese, and the Indian government for their continuous support towards this program in empowering our youths. And most of all, Mr. Speaker, I acknowledge the engine room work done by our youths under this initiative and the important role of the land units who have contributed to this program. Mr. Speaker, there is no need for this inquiry. There is no need for this inquiry because we have the monitoring system in place apart from the internal needs. Full stop. No inquiry. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to provide this update, and I strongly oppose the motion that is before us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Minister for his contribution to the debate. I now give the floor to the Minister for Defence, the Honourable Inias Ratu. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I thank the members who have contributed before me, but I stand to oppose the motion, Mr. Speaker, sir. I have clearly stated during the Business Committee proceedings, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we need to give the ministry time to implement the programs, but definitely there is always time for us to, as moved by the Honourable Leader of the NFP, to later assess the impact of the direct initiative to farmers in the agriculture sector. The effectiveness of it, whether it's succeeding or not, we will always have time, because as the Minister has just stated in the last 2 days, if I remember correctly, what government is giving to the ministry is not expenses. It is an investment. And investments, Mr. Speaker, sir, are not short-term, although there are some sort of short-term gains from most of these initiatives and programs. But we need to be fair to the ministry, and we need to be fair to the officials, give them time, because it also took time to bring the agriculture sector to where it is today. Of course, we are aware of the potentials, and government has set in place the strategic plan, the modernization plan, and of course allocate the resources accordingly as well, so that the sector performs better based on the potentials that are there and obvious, Mr. Speaker, sir. Of course, we fully understand and agree that the agriculture sector is of importance and, of course, well known to all of us as well. One, when we're looking at the agriculture sector, it's important for the country, Mr. Speaker, sir. It's just basically food and nutrition security. And let's look at the economic gains later on. But food and economic security, food and nutrition security is important, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have ratified the SDGs, eradication of poverty and food security, and we have stated it so many times in this August House, Mr. Speaker, sir. It's not only about providing food to our people, but we must be providing them with the right food. Make sure that we are conscious of the nutrition, because even in Fiji, it will surprise most of us, one of our key challenges is the triple burden of malnutrition. And of course, we have, according to the one of the surveys, problems on anemia and some food security related issues, Mr. Speaker. So this is why, if we look at the programs in detail, say for example, what the Honourable Member is suggesting, seeds and seedlings for cash crop. One, it's about food security, backyard gardening, and the other programs that they have, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that includes post-disaster recoveries, where the ministry provides cuttings, seedlings, for those areas that are badly affected as a result of disasters that we have. And of course, there are those that need seedlings for the new ventures that they are embarking into, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'll use the ginger farmers for example, Mr. Speaker, sir. And again, let's also be honest with ourselves, farmers or recipients of this must also be honest, Mr. Speaker, sir. There has been a lot of instances in the Ministry of Agriculture where they are provided with seeds. When they harvest, they sell everything and come back to the ministry for some more seeds for the next season. That is being irresponsible, Mr. Speaker, sir. It's a basic economic rule, Mr. Speaker, sir, the goose and the golden egg. If you want the golden egg, let's keep the goose. Watch this. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Must be a call from Nakoro. We have to look after the goose in order to keep receiving the golden eggs, Mr. Speaker, sir. And unfortunate with the agriculture in Fiji, particularly when we deal with smallholder farmers, most of them are not in a position to even reinvest. And that is why the programs are so important, because first they need to be self-sufficient, then they can have extras. When they have extras, then they can reinvest in the business so that they can grow and, of course, go into other financing initiatives as well. Materials provided to dairy farmers. We are all aware of the situation in the dairy sector in Fiji, particularly by 2006, they started to pick up the new trend in brucellosis and TB. And then when further testings were conducted, it surprised everybody, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it has affected almost the entire geographic regions and, of course, the livestock that we have as well, Mr. Speaker, sir. So 2006, 2009, that tells us that because we have been neglecting the livestock sector, it has built up slowly, and then we felt the brunt when it came to 2009. Mr. Speaker, sir, if we are honest in this August House, the recovery of the dairy sector, the reform was good, but that's more of the processing, the involvement of C.J. Patel, but when it comes to production, it's going to take a while, Mr. Speaker, sir. It's going to take a while. Because for dairy, Mr. Speaker, sir, husbandry practices, the weather is a major factor now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the nutrition and the feed. There are so many things to contribute, that contributes towards all further worsens the predicament that the dairy sector is in. But in terms of materials provided to dairy farmers, Mr. Speaker, sir, let me say this. Most of what's given to the dairy sector in terms of material is part of the recovery of from brucellosis and TB. Why, Mr. Speaker, sir? Most of the affected areas, if we are to sustain them in the longer term, they need what they call double fencing. The stock from one farm move to the neighboring farm. One of the problems in Waito, in most dairy cereal, animals are coming from one farm to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. To stop that, and that is why a lot of assistance is going. We need to contain the animals first within the farm. Then we can deal with the problem and then look at other issues that we can contribute to increased production, Mr. Speaker, sir. I will not go into the detail because there are other speakers after this. Irrigation pumps and piping, Mr. Speaker, sir, or maybe the use of technology. Of course, we need mechanization, but what do we do off-season, Mr. Speaker, sir? And this is why climate change is also affecting agriculture in a big way. And that is why they need now, the Honorable Prime Minister has just commissioned the new facility in Cornubia a few weeks back. These are the facilities that is not only needed in the research station, but the farmers need it themselves, Mr. Speaker, sir, so that we can be reliable and consistent in our supply, so that we can meet the volumes, meet the qualities, so that we can address the issues, Mr. Speaker, sir. Plowing and harrowing of land. As I've stated, Mr. Speaker, sir, and we are thankful that government is assisting not only in the provision of machines, but of course in land preparation, drainage works, etc., Mr. Speaker. Because if we want the smallholder subsistence farmer to be upgraded to semi-commercial, commercial level farming, they need some injection, they need some assistance by government. And that is why we welcome such but again, as I've stated, Mr. Speaker, sir, they need to be given time. so that they can do more, Mr. Speaker, sir. Breeders, goats and sheep. It's interesting that we want to assess this now. But I hope the honourable member knows that the Fiji Fantastic, which is the breed of the local sheep that we have, has been in the level since 1980. 1980, Mr. Speaker, sir. And it took about 10 good years to just perfect the breed so that it can adjust to Fiji's climatic conditions, and we are proud that we have that local breed. But then the Honourable Minister has talked about inbreeding a few years back. That is why we brought in other breeds, not only for sheep but for goat, the 3 cattle breeds, and the Swiss brown for dairy, so that we can have new stocks in anticipation that when things get better, we are in a better position to roll out these programs and address the issue, Mr. Speaker. Are they succeeding already? Yes, Mr. Speaker. Let's just look at the export levels. Let's look at the export over the years, Mr. Speaker. And we have often debated on this in this August House, Mr. Speaker. Although contribution to GDP is less than what it used to be, but because the economy has taken a complete turn from where it was years ago, Mr. Speaker. But when you look at the value of agriculture products, again, contribution to GDP is less. But when you look at the value, it keeps increasing, which is good for the country. And that, of course, is an indication that it is, most of the programs are already successful. And I do agree with the Honourable Bala, Mr. Speaker, sir. They have a monitoring and evaluation system within the Ministry of Agriculture. Let the Honourable Minister deal with it and bring back the reports. The AG's Auditor General's Office will also assess the effectiveness of the programs. But Mr. Speaker, sir, as I have stated, I know the state of the ministry when I came in 2012. That is why we came up with the modernization plan. That was the first initiative, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that leads to the strategic development plan and so forth. When you look at funding, the Honourable Kundrani said that we are decreasing. In 2012, Mr. Speaker, sir, allocation to the Ministry of Agriculture was around 87 million. If I remember correctly, around 37 million. Over the next few years, it has gone above the 100 million, and because of the economic situation that we are in, affects all countries, Mr. Speaker, sir. He's talking about the reduction, but it's within that context, Mr. Speaker, sir. But previously, it was around 30-something million. So, under this government, Mr. Speaker, sir, it has almost tripled, because it has gone over the 100 million mark, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, government, to be fair to the other sectors, is also providing the funds. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, I do not support the motion based on the arguments that I have made, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let's allow the ministry and the minister to carry on with the programs that we are doing, and we need to acknowledge all of them, including the minister, for doing such a great work. And of course, we will reap the benefits in the years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honourable Minister for his contribution. I give the floor to the Honourable Lenora Geragera-Tambua. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the motion by the Honourable Professor Biman Prasad. And in doing so, I'd like to begin by taking the House back to May the 25th, 2019, when in reply to a ministerial statement by the Honourable Minister for Agriculture, I said the following: at least the Honourable Minister is seen to be doing something. We have seen reports and heard of him distributing chicks, handing out seeds of vegetables, even though many are complaining about quantity and quality. I also said in 2019, Mr. Speaker, We have heard of him starting a new initiative of collecting young coconut trees that have germinated after lying on the ground for a while from trees in domestic compounds. All well and good, Mr. Speaker, but the Honourable Minister and his ministry must realise that in this depressed economic environment where people struggle to buy even the cheapest of foods like salt for cooking, they are simply unable to buy food for chicks or manure. Many in rural areas have access to animal manure, for sure, but those in peri-urban and other places don't. So it is imperative that the Honourable Minister looks into this so that this initiative doesn't go to waste. Also in May 2019, Mr. Speaker, I continued by saying we've also received complaints from people about the manner in which the distribution of assistance has been happening. These people have called our leader and our party office. We have received calls from Singatoka, in particular Nambitu, that only a few farmers had been assisted. And in fact, there is a claim that these farmers are well acquainted with the Honourable Minister and certain Agriculture Ministry officials at district level. This is the second time in a year that our office has received calls from Nambitu, and the complainants are thoroughly displeased. We hope the Honourable Minister looks into this matter. Then there have been complaints about a few advisory councillors, and even one Honourable Assistant Minister has been selective about which person has been assisted based on political support in the last elections, unquote. This is what I said, Honourable Speaker, on May the 25th, 2019. Mr. Speaker, this is precisely the point of the motion. Poorly thought out initiatives, dreamt up in isolation by ministers who are far removed from the realities of the ground, continue to be the order of the day. If the initiative succeeds, there's a big photo opportunity. If it fails, however, some poor civil servant gets the blame. As a responsible parliament, Mr. Speaker, we should take our role of making ministers accountable to us seriously. We cannot allow willy-nilly policy implementation to continue without having brought ministers and civil servants to parliament to answer for their actions in front of a committee. I know, Mr. Speaker, some will try to pull out the separation of powers argument to say that we cannot do this. And I'd like to say that this is complete nonsense. Powers need to be separate precisely because they need to keep each other accountable. Ministers are ministers because they are members of this parliament first and not the other way around. Therefore, they are accountable to this House as a first priority. And this is called the doctrine of ministerial responsibility, for those ministers who don't know this. Why then assess the impact of agriculture initiatives? Mr. Speaker, over the years of this government's leadership, the contribution of agriculture to our overall GDP is now at 8.1%. There is so much untapped potential here that needs to be utilized. This is why we need to assess agriculture initiatives to figure out what they are doing, how they're doing it, and whether we are doing it effectively and efficiently. The recent pandemic has shown us just how vulnerable we are as a country to external shocks. So just imagine if we were able to export high-quality agricultural products at a good enough quantity to keep the economy going. And this is why I'm supporting this motion, and I commend this motion to the House, Mr. Speaker. But just before I take my seat, I know that the Honourable Minister for Agriculture is very disruptive when we speak, and he was asking me who, and I would just like to remind him of an email that was sent by the owner of a bullock in April of this year, and was also sent to me, and I sent it to him with no reply at all, Mr. Speaker. And during the last sitting, I was gesturing to him to say, what happened to the email? And this is what he goes. So, Mr. Speaker, this is why I support this motion, because we need to have a look at the initiatives brought by the Ministry of Agriculture. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Order, order. I thank the Honourable Member for a contribution to the debate. I now give the floor to the Honourable Minister Fayez Koya. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, sir. Honourable Speaker, sir, again, we witness an exercise in futility by the Honourable Biman Prasad. We all know, Honourable Speaker, sir, this is an actual ploy by him to get some airtime, Honourable Speaker. Some airtime where he... Exactly, sir. He forgot about the airtime he was getting in New Zealand, so he decided to express himself here, sir. He's looking for some airtime, so where he can, as usual, pontificate and try to play a hero, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, sir, the truth is, he manipulates, he twists, and he conveniently omits facts and plain, simple, opines untruth in this august House, Honourable Speaker. That's the only reply that he can have. And at the same time, what he is doing, and what is most important, sir, he is misleading the people in Fiji, Honourable Speaker, sir. Honourable Speaker, sir, Honourable Prasad refers to visiting locations such as Navua, visiting farm roads and seeing growing grass. Why is he only visiting farm roads now, Honourable Speaker, sir? Is it because elections are near, Honourable Prasad? Where was he when our government agencies were actually clearing? Exactly. Where was he when our government agencies were actually clearing the farm roads and assisting and supporting the farmers over the months and years, Honourable Speaker? This is all that he can observe from a singular visit, Honourable Speaker, sir. It's actually surprising that Honourable Prasad is oblivious to the information not only shared by the Fijian government, but agencies such as the UN FAO. Please go and do your research, Honourable Prasad. The agriculture census undertaken by the Ministry of Agriculture, Honourable Speaker, in partnership with the UN FAO, indicates, and this is important information, I wish you would read it, Honourable Prasad, indicates that 190,460 agriculture household members participate in at least one agriculture activity. That's crops, livestock, fishery, or forestry. During the 2020 agriculture census, Honourable Speaker, a total value of crop production in Fiji was recorded at $2.5 billion, Honourable Speaker. Temporary crops were valued at $2.3 billion, whilst $163.6 million were permanent crops. The permanent crops are mainly those that are exported, Honourable Speaker, whilst $2.3 billion worth of crops are actually circulating within the Fijian economy as market produce or as subsistence crop where families actually grow food for themselves. Mr. Speaker, sir, our programs, this government, our programs are actually targeted towards unlocking our potential by bringing in innovative and new ideas. We have actually strengthened our programs, which have proven that our agriculture sector crossed the $100 million in exports, Honourable Speaker. In fact, with kava being one of our largest exporters, we have seen how Fijians have now actually diversified into niche products. For instance, a few weeks ago, we saw samples of kava cookies in the market. And why not, Honourable Speaker, sir? I hope all the farmers are listening to these outrageous claims by Honourable Biman Prasad, but this is nothing new. We care for our farmers, Honourable Speaker, and we actually support their expansions. Our very own Fijian organic and Fijian produce emblems are getting traction both locally and internationally. And I'll come back to the Fijian organic branding, sir, because he needs to be taught a lesson about organic stuff. Our cooperatives have increased their farm mechanization program, either sugarcane, rice, or ordinary farmers. They're actually adopting to new technologies and moving up the value chain. We have seen how our grassroots businesses step out of their comfort zones when they're given the right support and empowerment, Honourable Speaker, sir. Our farmers, particularly the young ones, are moving and progressing towards value adding and exports now. Honourable Speaker, sir, Honourable Gavoka talks about models. We have actually piloted successful models through our cooperatives, whereby the government, the private sector, banks and donor agencies actually partner to fund particular profit-making operations. Mr. Speaker, sir, a cooperative is producing cassava, vundi, and komala chips in Nambolini. Never before had we actually seen this, but this is happening right now. Successful PPP models established and implemented, Honourable Speaker. This week I actually talked about how well exports of turmeric, kava and spices are actually doing in destinations like the US, including our traditional crops like ndalo and cassava to Australia and New Zealand. This has not eventuated by just magic, Honourable Speaker, sir, but through well-crafted, targeted policies and assistance by the Fijian government. And the data for all of this is freely available, Honourable Prasad. Earlier this week, when I was sharing vital information with this august House about how the government is mainstreaming climate change into crucial trade and economic policies, one of the members on the other side saying it was all unnecessary information. This is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, he has no idea about the impact of climate change on Fiji's agricultural sector. He means to discredit the actual research done by scientists and international organizations. However, he needs to learn that agriculture production is affected globally by increasing temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, and more frequent and intense rain and weather events. If it weren't for these government initiatives that we've put in place, Fiji's agricultural sector would have suffered to the brink of collapse, Honourable Speaker, sir. And what are other reasons why we've suffered, sir? You look at 1987, and it's a small fact, but it's a big fact. In 1987, we had a massive brain drain. We didn't have enough vets in the country. We had none. Today, we have quite a few, Honourable Speaker. We had to bring them back. And Honourable Speaker, sir, just a last couple of points that I wanted to raise. Let me give the Honourable Biman Prasad a lesson about organics. You can come here and pontificate about organics and say, oh, we should be exporting more organic material out to the world. It doesn't happen overnight. You need to get the soil tested. You need to make sure that you're certified. The certifying organization, POETCOM, is the only certifying organization that will allow us entry into the US, into Australia. Now, we are fortunate enough that the certifying authorities actually come here, learn, because you pontificate about these things without learning. Yes, we have a massive organic industry that we can actually turn our little organic industry into. As a matter of fact, Honourable Sir Ratu will tell you our ginger coming out from some places in Fiji is 500 times more powerful than the other gingers in the world. But we must manage it and do it carefully so we get access into the markets. Honourable Speaker, he has no idea about organics, and you shouldn't pontificate about it, because we are supporting as many organic farmers as we can, and the Ministry of Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport has the organic labelling ready for all our organic farmers. And this is why we are now able to send organic turmeric out to the US. You don't listen, nor do you read about it, Honourable Biman Prasad. Lastly, sir, he should stop talking about telling the truth, because he never tells the truth. Honourable Speaker, one just last, and this really irks me, when he says the silent 25. I'm not silent, she's not silent, he's not silent, we are not silent, we are unified. Honourable Prasad, we are unified. We are unified behind one leader. We're not leaderless and we're not rudderless like you are. Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker.
Order. I thank the Honourable Minister for his contribution. I now give the floor to the Honourable Nosi Kurindrani. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for this opportunity to make my contribution in support of the motion before the House. Before that, sir, I want to thank the Minister. Thank the Minister for these programs and initiative and his hard working. Unfortunately, sir, the result has not been impressive. Sir, I want to speak on the Honourable Pravin Bala's statement regarding the internal control. Sir, his ministry, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, is one of the 22 government agencies that failed to reach the timelines of submissions of draft financial statements. Sir, 2020. Sir, I will be brief. We understand that all these programs are still in progress, and this motion is timely to ensure that the procedures are complied by the ministry. We need to know whether internal control measures were in place to ensure the efficient and effective implementation of these programs. Sir, it is important that we should ensure that proper management of expenditure is fundamental to ensuring value for money in delivering services to the community. We need to have cost-effective internal controls within the purchasing and payment systems, as it plays an important part in ensuring that funds are not being misused, no favoritism, avoid over-expenditure and corruption. Unfortunately, sir, if you look at the Auditor General Audit Report on Economic Service Sector of 2018, it highlighted some of the anomalies in procurement of goods and services by the Ministry of Agriculture, which cast doubt on the ministry's capability, transparency and accountability and integrity in the implementation of this program and initiatives. The Auditor General reported that there were instances were noted where quotations were not obtained in a timely manner. Instances were noted where procurements were made in invalid and expired quotations. Local purchase orders were raised and issued before the procurement request forms were approved. In most instances, local purchase orders were not raised for the purchase of ginger seeds, hire of trucks for and land facility programs. Therefore, sir, we have doubt that these programs will be properly managed by the ministry. Anyway, before I go further, sir, may I ask the minister, was there any study done before these programs were approved and implemented? I said this because considering the economic and social impacts of these programs, if I was a minister, if I was in his place, first I would ensure that internal control and standard process and procedures are being complied to. Construct more farm roads, especially in villages and rural communities. Establish collection centers for rural and maritime communities. We noted that $1 million has been allocated for one of these programs. That $1 million is enough to build 10 collection sheds and collection sheds around the country. Yes, it would have been better used in constructing collection sheds. Construct cold storage facilities for productive farming communities. Organize market outlets. Provide machines such as diggers for land clearing and drainage purposes. Provide subsidy to successful semi and commercial farmers like in the sugar industry. We always ask why the assistance given to sugarcane farmers cannot be given to non-sugarcane farmers. Sir, this is why, aside from the above, was there any study done in regards to the approval of these projects? But since it's already on the ground, the only way we need to ensure that the taxpayers' money are properly utilized is to conduct an investigation or review of these programs as proposed in the motion. Thank you, sir.
I thank the honourable member for his contribution to the debate. I now give the floor to the Honourable Sachinder Nand. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. My contribution to the motion will be very brief. To start off with, like all others in this side, we do not support the motion that has been put forward. Fiji's agriculture sector and
when people on the other side compare us with our neighbors, do they understand the economics of scale? The average size of farm in Fiji is around 4 hectares. The average size of farm in Australia is about 100 hectares. Mechanization, economics of scale plays a very important part. And also, Mr. Speaker, sir, they've said we are not contributing. I'd like to further elaborate on Honorable Inya Sidorata's comments about the dairy industry. The Fijian government, or Bainimarau government, has been continuously putting money into the dairy industry. Do they understand what the dairy industry has gone through? It is not about talking to a farmer for a few minutes. You'll understand what the dairy industry has been through. You need to be in the dairy industry to know what it has gone through. Every farmer has tried his level best to get the milk production together with direct assistance of the government. Year in, year out, the Fijian government has put in money in the dairy industry. It is not because our farmers are lazy. It is not because that there is not enough support given to the dairy industry. It is because the diseases that has been prevalent in the industry, that's why the production has come down. And it is not because of Fiji First government. It is because of the puppy leaders government and the other governments before them. They have continuously failed to look at the dairy industry. They have failed to look at the testing methods. They have failed to look at the husbandry practices. They have failed to look at the support services. That is why what the dairy industry is today. Had they done their job that time, the dairy industry would have been flourishing now. Without the government's, Fiji First government's restructure of the dairy industry, there would not have been a dairy industry. Do people know that? The dairy industry was run to the ground. They restructured the dairy industry, and now the farmers are getting the support that they need. We are already in the downturn because of the diseases. We have lost more than 50% of our cattle due to the diseases. But the government, through its lot of rehabilitation program, they've managed to get the dairy industry up, and hopefully with the continued support, we will get there. And the farmers are very hard with regard. And they have talked about exports. Yes, we may not be exporting vegetables, but look at our markets. We have plenty of fruits and vegetables in the market. Our citizens are in the dirt. We have a small seeding program, the seed distribution, everything. Well, people are able to sustain themselves. Sustainable agriculture is what the government wants. We do not want to have programs that we are not able to sustain them for a prolonged period. And also, Mr. Speaker, sir, we may not be exporting the fruits, but look at fruits like dragon fruit and guava. There's plentiful supply in Fiji now. People are able to enjoy good quality fruits at a reasonable price, rather than paying for the imported ones. We cannot write off our agriculture and say the government is not working. It is working. Government has continued to develop infrastructure, so the farmers have access to the markets. They're able to bring produce to the market, get good value for them because of the good quality they are able to deliver. And also, Mr. Speaker, sir, before I sit down, I'd like to add on that meeting 25, 26 people in a group meeting in Bua does not mean they have met all the people, all the agricultural farmers. They do not represent the total agricultural sector. If they have to do it, they should have started from the beginning of the term, met all the farmers, found out what their difficulties are, hear it continuously here. Now come at the last time to get some political airtime and start talking to farmers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. With that note, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for honourable members. For the purpose of complying with standing orders with respect to sitting times, I now call the leader of Government in Parliament, the Honourable move a suspension motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I move on to Standing Order 6. That so much of Standing Orders 23.1 is suspended so as to allow the House to sit beyond for the 8 p.m. today to complete any items listed on today's paper.
Is there a second?
Honorable Speaker, I second the motion.
Now on the Leader of Government in Parliament to speak on this motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, briefly, we are still on Schedule 2 and we still have Schedule 3 pending as well, Mr. Speaker. Sir. That's the request to see it beyond 4:30 p.m. Winak.
Honourable members, the floor is now open for debate on the motion. Is there anyone wishing to take the floor at this time? As there's no one wishing to take the floor, honourable members, Parliament will now vote. The question is that under Standing Order 6, that so much of Standing Orders 23, Clause 1, is suspended so as to allow the House to sit beyond 4:30 p.m. today to complete the remaining items listed on today's order paper. Does any member oppose the motion? No. As no member opposes, the motion is agreed to unanimously. Honourable members, on that note, we will take a break for afternoon tea.